Hello, everyone. Today we'll be presenting on the corn crisis, global climate change impacts on global maize production. Our goal is to explain how climate change is already affecting maize production and what that means for global food systems and humanity as a whole. We'll start by defining climate change, then explain why maize is so important. We're going to look at observed changes, analyze the impacts of these changes, and then we'll finish by discussing possible solutions. So, what is climate change? Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns, primarily driven by greenhouse gas emissions. These changes include rising global temperatures, shifts in precipitation, and more frequent extreme weather events like droughts and floods. Some of the main causes of climate change include burning fossil fuels for transportation and electricity, deforestation, and agricultural emissions. These human activities increase greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which in turn trap heat and disrupt natural climate systems.
All right, next we're going to be looking at why maize matters. So the question is, why are we focusing specifically on maize? So very important to note that maize, also known as corn, is a global staple crop grown on nearly every continent. So that means it's essential not just for human consumption, but also for animal feed and biofuel production. So globally, it's also very important. It is one of the top three most important crops in the world. It plays a major role in global food security, especially in developing countries where populations are more vulnerable to climate impacts. So that means that when maize production is disrupted, it can affect entire food systems and economies. All right, so we got a little visual here, just highlighting regional output of maize, showing you how widespread the production is. So you can see hotspots in the Midwest, in Asia, in Europe, South America, and that reinforces why even small disruptions in yield can have large-scale consequences.
Next, we are going to look at observed changes due to climate change. Observed impacts. Research shows that climate change has already caused 4 to 6% decline in agricultural productivity. We're also seeing increased variability in crop yield, which makes food supply less predictable. Even more concerning, these impacts are happening earlier and more intensely than scientists previously expected. Temperature effects. Rising temperatures are especially harmful to crops such as maize. They can shorten growing seasons and interfere with grain formation, which directly reduces yield. And extreme heat can also stress plants during critical development stages. Here's just an infographic explaining how heat just causes disruptions in the growth and yield. Precipitation changes. Climate change is also disturbing rainfall patterns. Some regions are expecting more drought while others face more flooding. This unpredictably makes it harder for farmers to plan and reduce overall crop productivity.
Now we'll be looking at some more broad impacts of climate change on maize and just not beyond what we only observe. So physical impacts that you see are reduced soil moisture, increased evaporation, water scarcity. These things all create a higher demand for irrigation, which then adds more stress on water resources that might already be limited. And that obviously can lead to some really, really unfortunate things. Here's an example. In the US Great Plains, maize yields are projected to decline by 20 to 70% by the end of the century, while at the same time, the irrigation demand is expected to increase, which is just going to make the whole water shortage problem even worse than it already is. Here are some biosphere impacts. So climate change doesn't only affect, like what we've talked about already. It also can affect the biology of other crops, especially maize, though. That's what we're talking about. So in maize specifically, heat and drought disrupt key stages like germination and flowering, which can lead to major losses in yield from agriculture. There's also increased pressure from pests and reduced biodiversity, which is also a negative. Continued here, what I was talking about, germination, flowering, these things get disrupted, it causes problems. Here's an example, just a diagram of what I was just talking about. Next are the human impacts. So the environmental changes that we've been discussing translate directly into human involved impacts. So things that we see are food insecurity, higher food prices, economic stress for farmers, increased global inequalities. These are all things that can affect us in our daily lives. And it's all stemming from the same factors of climate change and its impact on, maize. Here's another diagram that we thought was very interesting. It has to do with maize production and how it's used throughout the entire world. As you can see, the United States makes up a large portion. So does China, Brazil. But this doesn't necessarily mean that this is how this is always going to be. We saw an example in class today where in the future it looks actually more like Africa is going to start producing a lot more maize, and this global balance is due to shift. Finally, what's next for global climate change and maize? So to address the challenges that we're facing with the maize crisis, scientists and farmers are working on adaptation strategies. Some of these strategies are crop diversification, developing drought-resistant maize, improving our irrigation efficiency in general agriculture, and switching to more sustainable farming practices. Other interesting advances like genetic engineering and improved crop modeling, which are more in the STEM sciencey field, are also actually helping improve our yields and fix these problems that we've been facing. Finally, in the big picture, what we've been talking about this whole presentation, climate change is already impacting maize production, and these effects are only going to continue to worsen. While adaptation strategies exist, they're definitely not perfect, and they're still being worked on today. And global food systems are definitely at risk if this continues, meaning that climate change must be addressed in order for us to be secure in our maize production and food. Here are our references. This is what we use to source all our information in the slides. Thank you for listening to our presentation.